Oh, cool. I did Google Earth them all. I did look them all up on Google Earth, but that was the extent of it. So do annexations not have to go to the planning commission?
They do, but they don't take action on the bringing them in. They have to recommend zoning for whatever.
So is that
whatever
why
it is.
there's no zoning recommended on these? Because it hasn't gone to planning commission? Okay. Because I was confused because I didn't think there were
See, there's
any planning
automatic,
items.
some of the stuff is automatic zoning. If it normally
It
comes in as
automatically comes in
residential.
as residential
residential.
or community conservation, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
No, I don't. We have 4 services, so I think.
You always go to the same one.
Yeah.
Ready? We are past 6 o'clock.
Big mountain crowd.
Sounds like it's on.
Eric and legal, y'all ready? Yes, sir. Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back in chambers. It's good to not be looking at fellow council members on a little square on Microsoft Teams. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 monthly meeting of Mount Pleasant Town Council. We have an amended agenda, or revised agenda, I guess is a better term, that is published. And before we get to item 1 on there, which is prayer, I just feel that we ought to acknowledge the hard work of our staff during the COVID crisis, not only dealing with protecting the public, but figuring out how to keep all of our critical services going without any interruption, and there was none. And then they had to figure out, how do you bring 650 workers back and redo a town hall? Eric, you've done a fantastic job. I want to thank our staff for that. And I want to thank our police chief for Sunday, for a unifying unity march on that bridge. And we know it wasn't just the police department, the fire department, public services, probably recreation, everybody else did a wonderful job. I know I came back here after the march, and where's Jody? There's Jody, didn't recognize you. I don't know how many trucks you had out with signs and stuff on it. I saw them rolling, but Eric, it was, I was impressed. We had quite a fleet, and that was to keep the public safe and to keep traffic going. So let's thank everybody for all of that. And we have, during public comments, we have another thanks for another group of citizens who have done something, and we will get to that. So now let's get to item 1, which is the prayer, led by Rabbi Revson, and then we will have the pledge, led by Mayor Pro Tem Tom O'Rourke. Please stand.
Sovereign of the universe, who created all in love, teach us to love all that is good and beautiful in this world. Teach us to honor the dignity of difference, recognizing that one who is not in our image is nonetheless in your image. Never forgetting that people not like us are still people like us. At this fateful moment in the human story, bless us that we may be a blessing to others. Guide us to honor you by honoring one another. We ask for you to protect the great men and women of law enforcement, and shelter them under your protection, under the protection of your divine wings. For is it not axiomatic in the sacred tradition that when one of your children steps beyond the world of his or her needs or wants, this very act opens the doors to your blessings, and it's for these bountiful blessings that we pray for today. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Item number 4, public hearings, awards, and presentations. Are we doing any?
No, sir.
None tonight. Item number 5, approval of the minutes of the January 6th special town council meeting, the April 27th, May 1st, and May 5th, 2020 emergency town council meetings, and the May 12th town council meeting. We have been busy.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve that long list of minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Mr.
opposed?
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'm abstaining from 2 of these because I was absent on National Guard, and the clerk has already put that in the minutes.
2, okay.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, you're good. All right. All opposed, say no. All right, the minutes are approved as noted. Item number 6 is public comment. If you have a public comment, please come forward to the lectern, give your name and address, and you have 2 minutes. Do we have our light system set up?
I've got it here, sir.
You got it, okay.
Yes, sir. First speaker is John Evans.
You got the timer, Eric? 'Cause
Yes, sir.
can we drop this?
Yes, yes, when you're speaking, absolutely, as we did.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is John Evans. I live at 15 Vincent Drive here in Mount Pleasant, lifetime resident of Mount Pleasant. What I'm about to tell you tonight, some of you may know and some of you may not know, but I'm gonna make you aware of. On Tuesday, June the 2nd, the command office at the National Guard Army here on Mathis Ferry Road received a call from Washington DC. They needed 500 troops in Washington immediately. Major Hawkins, who was the administrative officer at the battalion, went to work. They started calling, bringing boys in, bringing boys and girls, or men and women in, and eliminating the sick, crazy, and blind. They got down to 455 troops who deployed to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. They returned home today at 1:15 at the Army. I was there to greet them. I talked with Chief Ritchie. Unfortunately, because of the voting going on, no patrol cars could be in the area. It looked like he was kind of wanting to squash voter participation. And the fire department, the chief told me, he said it was just so short a notice we get, and I understood. Channel 2 was there, and at 6 o'clock, they probably weren't on there. But anyway, the mission for these guys are up there, when they hit the ground in Washington, was to immediately join forces with the federal agents who were surrounding the White House. That is the area of operations for the troops that came out of here. As I said, they came home today, 1:15. Everybody's here, everybody was safe. They only had one incident. One individual was hit by lightning, but they got him. But anyway, and I know this is not protocol, but I have given a little note to Gary Santos, Councilman Santos,
Sure.
and asked that somewhere in tonight's process, if the note that I have, a thank you, be added to the minutes of the council meeting, thanking these guys for the outstanding job they did while they represented Mount Pleasant and South Carolina in Washington. The reason I don't care, that's somebody else to figure. That's above my pay grade. They went, they did the job, and now we're home. And that's what I've asked for.
Mr. Santos, if you would read that.
I'll be happy to read it. Town of Mount Pleasant wishes to commend and thank soldiers of the 1st Battalion, 118th Infantry, South Carolina Army National Guard for their participation in the military assistance to civil authorities during the period June 3 through 8, 2020 in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecil.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Margaret Blaylock.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. God told me to talk to a random couple sitting beneath a 5G tower 1 mile from my home just over a month ago. While I felt uncomfortable stopping them, I am so glad that I did. I quickly learned the husband was a respiratory specialist and his wife was an anesthesiologist. After telling them about the symptoms I believed were a result of the EMF being transmitted from the tower, the husband commended me on my ability to discern my physiology and my ability to articulate it to them. I told them I had broken my neck and suffered a traumatic brain injury years prior and became hypersensitive to my body in my struggle to regain my health. The wife then asked me if I had a metal plate in my neck, so I answered yes. She explained that people with metal in their bodies are more susceptible to electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and she told me the diagnosis code for it. It wasn't until I was forced to stay home for an extended period of time that I made this discovery. Unable to do multiple therapies I was previously engaging in on a regular basis that I had now learned helped reduce the effects, combined with more wired time at home, enabled me to figure this out. Meeting these doctors simply validated my concerns, and God certainly knew how badly I needed that. Mention this topic, and most people say there's no need for concern. They're excited about faster speeds, self-driving cars, virtual surgeries, and smart homes. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm freaking out because this stuff is like tearing up my life rapidly. I finally have an explanation to the bizarre symptoms I have been experiencing. I'm going to list them in approximate order of which they started happening so that you may pay attention to your own physiology, because this stuff is affecting everybody. If you go to a doctor, there's no telling what kind of diagnosis you may get and what kind of drugs and or surgeries or medical devices they want to stick into you that could further subject your body to God only knows what, when quite frankly you may be very healthy just like I am. I am the best health of my life at 50 years old. I've never eaten this good, I've never exercised this good, and this is like what's happening to me. Sinus pressure, tinnitus, dizziness, lightheaded, inability to balance, digestive issues, fluttering spasms of my gut organs, memory loss, confusion, blurred vision, blacking out upon standing, unexplained fatigue, labored breathing, shortness of breath, tingling, hot and cold sensations in my feet and calves, deep inner ear and earlobe pain, multiple limbs simultaneously falling asleep, pressure in the back of my head, stiffness in my neck, and random muscle
Hillock.
cramping.
Ma'am.
2 minutes. So, can we get your
I
name
have
and
a
address
lot.
for the record? We didn't get your name and address.
Margaret Blaylock,
Yes, ma'am.
and it's 1417 Chimney Swift Lane.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Mary
Next,
Lee,
please.
Mary Lee Waters.
Marilyn Waters is gonna come after Michael German, and that's me. I'm approaching the podium as we speak. Good evening. My name is Michael German. I live at 1707 Snowden Road. For those of you who don't know me, I'm not in the town of Mount Pleasant, but I'm your neighbor in the settlement community of Snowden. Matter of fact, the buffer zone to your town now is Long Point Road on one side, Long Point subdivision on one side, and Egypt. We are the group of people that's been there over 100 years while we watch you grow towards our town. Here's why I'm here. The main reason I'm here. We been there for, like I said, over 100 years. Mount Pleasant Waterworks, the town of Mount Pleasant, just ran some new sewer lines in my community. To get to those people who decided to go in the town of Mount Pleasant, my concern, my issue is to run those lines, you had to go right by my house. But you, the town council, as well as the folks on Mount Pleasant Water Department, are saying no to me unless I join the town of Mount Pleasant. That's my only option in. I think that's so unfair. I think that goes without, that decision was made without any input from me. You made that decision. You didn't ask me if I wanted to come into town. You made that decision, and the conditions are your contiguous piece, which no one from my community was a part of that decision-making process. Hey, interesting. That's why we're having some of the issues here today. I don't know why you're afraid to talk to me, but the assumptions need to stop. I think what's going on in the world now, it can amplify what I'm saying better. It needs to stop. Don't be afraid to talk to me. Don't assume that you know what I want. I am right here. We are right there. Just ask us. Let's come to the table and talk. But you have to talk to me. And again, I'm going to say this in closing. I don't want you to go and ask Jennifer, Pete, or Paul, because they may say something that you're comfortable of hearing. That's the other part of the problem. I want you to talk to the people from those communities that say that this is the person that I want to speak for me. I guarantee you'll get a better answer, and not only that, you'll hear what the community wants and not something that you all may assume that we want. It's time to talk. I mean, it's way past that time for us to talk. But you can't do it without me. And let's stop the assumption. Thank you very much.
Ms. Waters?
My name is Mary Lee Waters. I live at 771 Long Point Road. I've spoken to this body before. Some of you are new, but I am the current president of the Snowden Community Civic Association, and I'm going to piggyback a little bit off what Mr. German said. I, of course, have sewer from what was titled Phase 1. I am not in the town, don't have to go into town, because that was never a contingency when I got my sewer. Also, as I read past minutes from the Annexation Committee, if that still exists, I learned that utility was going to be part of the plan that a committee said would be part of the aggressive annexation plan. But also the past water supply chair stated that utility should never be used as a tool to force annexation. And it shouldn't be. The utility company should be in the business of making money. As long as I pay my bill, they get their money. So that's what I'm going to say on that. Also, one other concern within my community, because Snowden is in the county, and of course the town is in the county, and the traffic, whenever there's an accident on Long Point Road, our community is used as a detour. And that affects our community members, our children, no sidewalks, and we want to have that addressed as well. If it's going to be used as a detour, and I can understand that there's no way around a two-lane road, police presence should be around, and the traffic should be directly at a very specific street, not to go through our entire community, impacting our community. So in other words, we shouldn't be impacted if we're not going to have a seat at the table. If we're not going to have a seat at the table, then we should be considered when things occur that impact us. And thank you for your time.
Jeffrey Bellino?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My comments will be pretty short. On May 31st, 2020, Mount Pleasant Police Department assisted in the tear gassing and arrest of dozens of peaceful protesters in Marion Square. I know this not through the Post and Courier or any other local newspaper, but because I was there. Although the Unity March was a good first step, I would like to humbly ask the town council to consider more concrete steps to prevent this from happening again. I believe it's a misuse of our local police department that actually keeps us safe to send them fighting peaceful protesters on the peninsula rather than on our streets keeping us safe. And Chief Ritchie, I was one of the people who watched your live stream with the Charleston BLM people, and I appreciate you reaching out and talking to us and marching with that Unity March. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
That's all I have, sir.
Is that all? Anyone else to speak? Anyone who didn't get a chance to sign up? All right. Thank you all very much. That ends item number 6 on the agenda, which was public comment. Item number 7 would be consent agenda items. There are no consent agenda items because we have not had planning committee since March. Is that right? March? March. And no planning commission as well. So this moves us to item 8, which is planning. And so that would be Mr. Ulma.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. You're going to run my slides, Lauren, for me. These are the items we have for you this evening from planning. There are several annexations, and rather than taking them through the planning committee, these are brought to you directly at tonight's meeting. The first one is an ordinance that would provide for annexing about 4 acres of land at 3056 Murdoch Drive.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd be glad to make a motion that we approve items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we have a second. We would be in discussion. Let the chair just ask briefly for the record and for everyone's understanding exactly kind of what we're looking at here, just in a nutshell. Mr. Olma, like 3 acres where on Murdoch?
This is, the first one is about 4 acres off Murdoch Drive, off Highway 41, and it would be community conservation zoning would be applied. The lot is vacant. There is a potential development that can occur adjacent to this parcel requesting annexation. The next one is off Snowden Road, about a ½ an acre, and it's in the vicinity where council, we've annexed numerous properties over the past few years. As you'll see, this is Porsche Bluff, so our maps are not in the right order. This would be conservation, community conservation zoning as well, and there is a single-family residence in this location.
That's the Porsche's Bluff one?
No, this is the Snowden one, sorry. The other slide was out of orders.
Got it.
Porsche Bluff is coming up next.
Okay.
There's another one at 2625, about a little less than ½ an acre on Linen Lane, off Hamlin Road.
Got it. So these are all residential, single-family?
Yeah, this one happens to be vacant.
Okay.
And then the final one is off Porsche Bluff, 1581. It is low-density neighborhood, so it would get R1, low-density residential zoning designation, and there is an existing home on this parcel requested for annexation.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I would like to move that we separate item 1 out of the total 4.
All right, I don't think you need a motion for that, sir. Mayor, I believe that we can take all of them, but if one council member objects, we'll take them separately. If you would address item 1, and then if someone would like to make a combined motion for the last 3, that's fine, or you can address them one at a time.
Okay. So we do have a motion on the floor to do all of them.
And that motion is void.
Okay. All right. So you have a motion for the first one?
On item 1, I've been out there to look at it. This location is way off of Highway 41. And it may be part of a future extended development, but that hasn't occurred. And for providing services to that one site is not in the best condition for police, fire, or public services. And while the lot looks vacant, I went out there and it looks like there's somebody living out there. And I would just like to move that we defer on item 1 until we get some more information or more details on item 1.
All right. We have a motion to defer. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Mr. Olma. So, but in order to annex into the town, it must be contiguous to the town. So is it the opposite side of that area is all part of the town? So would it really be extending
Yes.
our?
Yes, ma'am. It would be contiguous on the Dunes West side. Maybe the other map
Is
that
it-
has the shading, Lauren, it'll show the, there we go. So the gray solid areas are all within the town. The crosshatched areas are unincorporated counties, so it's contiguous by property line on that side. There is no connection, though, or street connection to that direction. Access would ultimately come from the
Canyon, comes from Canyon off of
Canyon
41.
Lane,
And
and
if you
there
go
is-
back out there, it's a long way back.
And the long parcel adjacent to it, to the left, there is an annexation agreement that was put in place about a decade ago that would allow that property to develop, get set up in the county, and then building permits would be issued within the town. And so access, the way that subdivision was at least sketched out, could provide a connection, a street connection to this parcel being requested for annexation through that future subdivision. We don't know the timing of when they would move forward. A new developer is interested in the longer tract of land at this point.
And that's why I asked to defer.
We have a motion to defer and a second. Yes, we're in discussion. Any other? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hyatt?
How do they even get to this? I don't see an access to that lot.
There's an access easement that runs along that, sort of about where Murdoch is labeled. There's one street, and then one over, there's just a gravel access easement that runs along that shared
Between the lots.
drive, along the easement of Oak, straddling that property line, yes.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Lanning?
So one question would be, since this is in the middle of a fairly sizable area of land that is unincorporated, and we do want as much as possible over time of the property that is within the town limits to be incorporated, and they're asking for that. Is it a typical pattern that you might have something in the middle like this, and then maybe eventually these other, maybe when I say eventually, I don't mean 5 years, but, you know, relatively quickly, others will also incorporate? Like, is that something that sets a pretty quick pattern?
Yes, ma'am, and we've seen that even recently in, where we saw it down near Oyster Point recently. The parcel that was contiguous you saw first, and then the adjoining one had to wait until a contiguity was established there. So it's just property owners making decisions about how they want to move forward and their timing. We don't always know the background to those.
Mr. Mayor?
I was just going to ask one more thing on top of that. So right now, the only thing that would happen, it's land, but it doesn't, oh, you said it does have something on it.
I'm not sure the degree of development on it in terms of a residence or other activities, so that's something we can double check. Our records had shown that it was vacant.
Okay, so my reason for asking that is, so therefore, we have something that, no particular time period on like water, like sewer or any of that kind of thing? Okay.
Correct.
So it might very well be that by the time that would be needed, there would already be others. I guess the question is, do we turn down an opportunity to be able to move this forward when we want to incorporate property into the town?
Mayor, I'm not asking to turn it down.
Right, it's just to defer.
I'm asking to defer so we get more contiguity
Right.
at the same time. Because for our services to have to serve this at some point in time, it's a long way down there.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Rambo first, and then Ms. Whittle.
Given the fact that Planning Commission hasn't met since February, I don't know when this application for annexation was received, or if there's any sort of legal timeline on when it has to be heard, or does deferring it a month still fall within that?
Number one, Planning Commission does not review annexations, so those are only handled at the council level.
Okay.
And so this would be first reading on this particular request, and a deferral would allow us to bring back more information. I don't know if there's an action timing on annexation.
We're not bumping up against that, as I understand it.
Okay.
In other words, we're not hurting anybody if we
Yeah,
defer this
if you
tonight.
defer.
Yeah, we're not penalizing anybody.
Councilmember,
Ms. Whitley, yes?
I would like to ask Howard if this deferral could be to Planning Committee for our next meeting so that we could look at it in greater detail, as I feel like that's the role of the committee, and that way we could bring a recommendation back to full council for next month.
I'm fine with that. There's just so much missing, and if you go out and look at this, it's a long way down there to serve it, and there looks like there is what appears to be a modular home, not in the best of condition, but there could be some issues back there with that.
All right. Anyone else before we vote? All right, all in favor of the motion to defer this item, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is deferred. Next, items 2, 3, and 4.
Motion to approve items 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve items 2, 3, and 4. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve items 2, 3, and 4 of Section A, new business, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They are approved.
First reading of ordinances 231, 232, and 233.
Old business, there is no planning old business. Item 10, council new business. We are bringing up again the emergency ordinance that was passed what seems like a lifetime ago. The world has changed, and I think some asteroids have even hit or something since then. And the first one is Emergency Ordinance 20034, which, what would be the right word? Suspended our acceptable packaging products. We did that to not only help our restaurants who were struggling, who were ordered closed, but also, if I remember correctly, there was a supply chain issue that some of those products weren't in fact available. So I guess what we have before us tonight, and we will defer to our legal advisor, is you have a copy of the ordinance in front of you. Would we just be renewing this?
No, sir. The items 1 and 2 by state law expired after 61 days, and that date was May 27th. So while as a practical matter, you are extending it, this is a new ordinance, which under state law would apply for a maximum of 61 days unless this council reduced that number. And again, since this is an emergency provision, it would only require one reading and require a 2/3 majority. But it is the same language, same provisions as this council passed in March, as is the second item.
Okay, so what we have before us, is this a draft of the new one?
Yes, sir, that is
Okay.
the new ordinance. Yes,
Got
sir.
it, thank you. Thank you, but it's exactly like the old one. It doesn't have to be 61 days, but as an emergency ordinance, that's as long as it can be. Is there any discussion for how long we would want? This is our packaging ordinance, also known as our plastics ordinance. Doesn't have to be 60 days. That would put us into August. Yes, ma'am.
Question, so do things just not expire? Like this just wouldn't have expired and just, how did it get brought back up?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Ma'am, the first one, which is the exact same as this one as it
Right.
relates to the plastics environmental
And that
packaging,
expired, right?
by state law, could only be valid because it was an emergency ordinance for 61 days. And so it automatically expired on May 27th. And therefore, it's brought up for council's consideration as to whether you want to, new ordinance, but extend that policy during this.
So I guess one of us put that on the agenda as something we would want. I'm just curious how it ended up on the agenda. No?
It was.
Do you understand my question?
I do. It was fairly clear to me, as a person who helps draft the agenda, that it was council's wish to go ahead and extend these ordinances.
Okay.
So that's how it arrived.
I got you.
But if I misread that, council does not have to approve these ordinances.
Right.
So.
No, you didn't misread that, and I brought it up with Eric because when we have two emergency ordinances and we're still in a state of emergency at the state level, and I believe the county level as well.
Yes, sir. And for council's information, we do have one more out there, just so you're aware. It's the restaurant outdoor seating that would expire later this month, and we'll make sure that's brought to your attention should you wish to address that at a later time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'm happy to make a motion that we approve item number 1 and 2 for 30 days and then take a look at it at our next meeting and see where we stand.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 1 and 2, and item 2 is the temporary signs that we did also for the restaurants when takeout was the only thing they could do for 30 days. So we would bring this back up in, 30 days.
Doesn't
get us to the next meeting, right?
It won't get us there because the next meeting, I believe, is Tuesday, the 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
All right,
How about defer it to our next meeting?
There you go. Regular scheduled meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion and the second is to approve these two until our next meeting. And so we can revisit them, we can renew or pass new ones then, and depending on, the legalities of that. But what it would do is allow the temporary suspension of the acceptable packaging and temporarily suspend the provisions that prohibit the temporary signs. I think, never mind, I don't need to opine on that, but good move to the next meeting.
Can we split them, or are we voting on both of them,
The motion is for both of them, and they're both only until our next meeting.
which is a month from now?
Yes.
Can I talk right now?
Yes, you have the floor. We're in
I'm just
discussion.
kind of, I'm kind of done with the signs. People are just putting them all over and they look, they just don't look really good, but that's just me. But I'm good with the other one.
Well, that's why I only wanted to go to 30 days, just to give them a little bit more time, and then we can always change it at the next meeting. Instead of 61 days, I just figured we'd do half of that.
Can I ask
Yes,
a question on the sign one? I think the biggest problem is that people are just sticking them all over the right-of-ways or whatever. Is there a way to alter it to where it has to be at least on your property? Or is it already like that, and we're just not necessarily enforcing the right-of-way? Does that make sense? Because people are sticking them everywhere. If they're at least on your property, they're not as bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, people for businesses are literally like going out to the nearest street corner and sticking them way out there when that's not their property.
Our ordinance didn't give them permission to do that. Right.
Okay, that was what, I didn't think so.
No.
No, that's
We're rule
that's
followers.
correct. I mean, the signs are intended to be on private property.
Okay.
But considering the circumstances.
Yeah,
Understood. And the effort that was being made to accommodate folks, trying to track, it would take you longer to figure out which ones are or are not on the correct piece of property than it would otherwise. So at this point, our enforcement, we've just let them go.
Lauren's here, and we've been doing a lot of work together with our chamber, and we have a map out of businesses that are, operating under the COVID reality and everything. We can push the word out if this passes, I believe, to all the businesses. We probably never had better communication with businesses than we've had these last 90 days, and let them know, hey, this is on your property, it's not in the rights of way, and we've extended it to our July meeting. But Lauren, I think you can push that out, and we'll certainly do it. We're still she and I are doing a Monday thing with the Mount Pleasant Chamber, and we'll let people know that, like you said, it's a good point. Don't put them in the rights of way.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Have we received feedback from businesses that they still are having supply chain issues with the plastics and and the same thing with the signs? Now that we're kind of back into the open phase and everyone's kind of back open, I'm just wondering whether or not it's truly necessary.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Whitley. I have heard that supply chain issues have been resolved, but I'd like to ask Lauren as well if she's heard anything.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. Thank you. Did we separate these two?
Yeah.
No.
It's a motion to approve too, and it's for just one more month till our next meeting.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Approved. And for the record, that was by a 2/3 majority since it is an emergency. Well, it's actually two emergency ordinances. Do we need to read those numbers or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
First and final readings, ordinances 234 and 235.
Thank you very much. That takes care of items 1. Item 2, item 3, discussion and possible action regarding the automatic aid agreement between the town of Mount Pleasant and the town of Sullivan's Island. I believe that's Mr. Santos.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I put this on here for us to discuss it and have some possible action, but I'm speaking with the Fire Committee Chairman, Mr. O'Rourke, has asked that this go to his committee, so I'll just go ahead and, we don't need to talk about it tonight and let it go to the committee. We can talk about it at committee and then come back to council, the next council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. We'll put that on our agenda, and Chief will have us briefed. Thank you.
That's good with you? Okay.
Yes.
There's really no motion or anything, but
No, I was just going to ask if when it went to committee, because the agenda item specifically says Sullivan's Island, I think we should look at Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms kind of together,
Well, they're not the same. Sullivan's Island is the only one that has automatic aid. Isle of Palms has mutual aid, which is what everybody has. Somehow Sullivan's Island was the only one to get automatic aid. And so I think we need to look at that really careful, but I've agreed to send it to the committee first, let them talk about it.
Mr. O'Rourke.
And for that reason, we will take it to the committee because there are good questions. And as Chief was explaining it to me today, I had more. And with each thing Chief explained, it helped me. So I thought before we just vote on it tonight, maybe let the committee have this, let the minutes show it. And then next month when we talk about this, I think we'll be better prepared to make a recommendation.
Thanks, y'all, very much. So that'll go to your committee.
Mr. Mayor, are we still under discussion?
There's no motion or anything. I mean, it's not an agenda item for tonight,
Okay.
for that matter. In other words, we are not having discussion on that tonight. It is going to be taken up in committee.
Okay.
And speaking of committees, with next month being July, what is the date of our committee meetings? Can somebody look that up?
The 6th.
The 6th? The 6th, got it, thank you. July the 6th. There, item B, under council business, there is no old business. Item C is executive session for legal and contractual matters. Item 2 is personnel matters. Is there a motion that we go into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
If this vote is successful, we will be going into executive session to discuss legal and contractual matters involving the contract for the town's legal representation. On personnel, we will be considering applications submitted to serve as corporate counsel and consideration of applications submitted to serve as municipal judges. And if, when we reconvene after this executive session, council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed in an executive session agenda or discussed in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of going into executive session for the reasons stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Where are we going to executive? Courtroom?
Yes, if we go out this way, sir, that'd be great.
Yes.
This back door.
Back door to the courtroom.
I'm so proud.
That's not where the food is. Time to put our mask back on.
I was going to talk.
Let's have you out of here before the polls close.
Don't know. We'll see.
I want family to vote today. Like, so I can't even believe you're here. I didn't know how you're doing it.
Yellow leather pants, It's okay.
I might have a set.
The flamingo should
excuse herself.
Is it really?
We are reconvening from executive session. No votes were taken, no action was taken, but there may be motions to result from the information and discussions that were had in executive session. Do we have a motion?
Yes. I move that we reappoint Judges David Michel, Thomas Hesse, and Tanya Stobbs to the municipal judges.
We have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to reappoint the 3 incumbent municipal judges, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The judges are reappointed. On the matter of corporate counsel for the town, Mr. DeMora has somewhat of an update for us.
Yes, sir.
On
Thank-
process.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council regarding the process. You know, it's been a fairly public process, and we've reached out to many different locations trying to find candidates. Also, if council desires at any time to retain a search firm for this position, I have information on 4. In general, they require a 25% fee, which is based on the hiring salary at the time the person comes on board. One firm's a little bit higher than that, and I'm talking to them now to see if they would be at the 25% level as well. So that part of the process is ongoing, and I can keep you updated as we move forward. And if at any time you want to choose that option of a search firm, then I'd ask for it to appear on a, that I get directed to do so.
Would that require a vote of council? You have certain spending levels that they fall under where you can contract with the firm. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, but I would not feel comfortable doing it if a majority of council wasn't supportive of that decision.
So it would be something we would come together and vote?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I do want to say for the record that we have sought and gotten good advice on which part of this process can be executive session and which part must be open session, and we are stuck to that.
Yes.
And we'll continue to do that. I don't think there's, yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
I just wanted to say that, just emphasize again, that, and I did this at PLJ, but that I feel like for a position of this level, you know, if this was a business situation, this would be very much a recruited position. It would be rare to randomly have somebody apply. That really is what we're looking for. So my preference is 100% to no longer drag this out, hire an expert, and let's get somebody in here.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am?
Is it a motion or?
No, it's not.
I did have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we only pay the percentage if they find the individual, right? Isn't that?
Sort of. Many of their arrangements are structured where there is it's broken into usually 3 stages of that fee. And let's say the final fee that they would receive is $45,000. Many times they break it into 3 stages, and the moment we sign a contract with them, we pay the first phase. So we pay that $15,000 in this example. And then as they progress and they present a slate of candidates, and then the second $15,000 is paid, and then the final amount upon hiring.
If they find our candidate.
Right.
Then they get the third piece.
Yes, but the moment we sign the contract, we'd be out money.
All right. So we don't have any proposals for that. We don't have any motion on that, but that's for us to consider moving forward. All right. Anything else?
Sorry, one more procedural
Yes.
question. So are we scheduling a special council meeting in the next week or two to begin interviews?
We don't know yet because as we discussed in executive session where names can be kept private, we don't know if the ones that appear to be top candidates still want to come in and be interviewed. If so, we would do that, but the contacts will be made. Is that right, Mr. Moore?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we don't know that yet.
Could I ask a good question?
Yes.
Is there any way to move forward with the interview process and move forward with the search firm as well? Like do both at the same time?
It doesn't appear so. One of the four firms has made a comment about a potential for a non-exclusive agreement, and I have to dig more into that. But the other three firms are exclusive, which means that we would have to stop our hiring process as they do theirs.
Okay, that makes sense.
Makes sense.
So we will get more information from Mr. Nomura, and then we'll contact the ones that we have identified that we feel are the top tier. Yes, sir.
Sorry, last thing. I just feel like we should, Mr. Nomura, go ahead and move forward with, those talks and negotiations with those firms. So that way, once we're ready, that step is already done and we can, bam, sign the contract if needed. I'm just so worried about this thing getting dragged out. That's it.
Understand.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll do.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hyatt?
So it seems it makes sense for us to interview any that we're interested in now before we sign the contract and lock into.
Before we
search.
sign one, but we might ought to find out the terms of one before we start doing interviews.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. O'Rourke.
But before we do that, I heard the administrator say he wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward unless 5 people were in favor of that. We don't know yet if there are 5 people up here that think going out for a search firm is a good idea.
Correct.
So he can bring back information that we would want to consider, but right now, we don't have that information.
Okay.
Right, good point.
Before we did that, you would bring back that information.
Yes. Anything else?
You're right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Before we end the meeting, I want to have this picture of Chief Ritchie put on the record for what a great job he did. I know you already commended him before the meetings started.
Yes.
But this picture needs to go in the minutes or somehow part of this council meeting for the great job he did on behalf of all of us.
Right.
All the citizens of Charleston, Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms. He did a great job, and we need to recognize that as part of this meeting.
Front page of the Post and Courier.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for doing that. There's nothing else on the agenda for tonight, unless I've skipped something. There being no further business for this body, we will stand adjourned.